All right, looks like the recording is going. So with that, let's get into the opening that I'll be teaching you today. That is the London system. So, a couple things before we start off. We talked about this earlier, but an opening aims to gain control of these center squares. These squares included, not this one, but these ones. These are primary squares. They have priority. So in an opening, we want to look for an opening that allows us to take control of these squares. So pushing your E pawn up 2 squares or your D pawn or your C pawn are all valid options. These three right here, I would argue, are the most 99% of the time, this is what white will play against you as black. And this should be 99% of the time what you are playing as white. So I'd like to start off with teaching you guys the London. It's a very beginner friendly opening, and that's because it doesn't have a lot of variation to it. Black can't really make things that complicated for us. At the most, black generally just copies white, and white just has an extra move because they went first, and black is just repeating what they're doing. So with that, let's look at the London. D4. That is the start of the London. You cannot play the London by moving your E pawn first or your C pawn first. It's D4. Queen's pawn up 2. Black has a couple options. They can move their knight out to this square, to knight F6. But personally, I don't find this to be the most common response. It's generally just D5. And at this point, they're playing directly into what we want. So we'll bring our knight out to F3. Again, black doesn't have a lot of options. They kind of just have to mimic us. They could play their bishop out first or their knight out, or they could play this knight out. It doesn't matter. Whatever black does, we don't worry about. But if they were to play something crazy, let's say they're going to put their E pawn forward 2 or their C pawn forward 2, you just capture it with your pawn and you're simply up a piece. So for example, this pawn comes forward, we capture it. This pawn comes forward, this one right here, we capture it. And we're just up material and we're already off to an advantage. But hopefully black doesn't do that. Hopefully black is trying to win the game, so they're going to play one of the best moves, which is their knight to F6. And then after this, we'll play bishop F4. Sorry, bishop F4. And then at this point, again, black's best move is just to copy us. And if they don't copy us, if they try and do a different move like this, or they try and push their pawn and then bring their bishop out, we don't worry about it. So I'm not going to give you the notation for that or even show you because it doesn't really affect you as white. All you should be focusing on primarily is what we're doing as white. So we push our pawn out, we push our bishop out, and we get our knight out. And as you can see, our pieces are controlling the center. Yay, as much of it as we can. And obviously black is fighting back. They are trying to control the same squares. So, what do we do here? This is where we need to start stepping it up. E3. Pawn to E3 is the move that we should be playing in this position. And again, black will most likely just copy us. They might try and bring this knight out at some point, and that's okay. This knight right here, it might come to C6, but just ignore it. It's not going to do anything on its own. So with that, we put our bishop out. They can do two things. They can take it, or they can go here. Those are the most common moves. Or they put their knight in the center. If they do any of those, if they play the knight move, remember this: our knight in front of the queen, and then the goal is to put pressure on their knight and make it leave. That'll be the goal. If they try and put their knight in the center, we're going to put pressure on it and try and make it leave. Now, they might just trade bishops with us. That's fine. If they take, we're going to take. And that's the line we're going to look at because I think it's one of the more even lines that black can play. But if they try and go backwards right here to this square, don't take their bishop. Just leave their bishop for now. But we're not going to look at that. It's best just to continue with the game plan. So if this gets played, we're still going to play the same plan as if they just took it. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. So if they play this, we're going to take with the queen, then we're going to continue the game plan, which I'm about to show you. If they go back, we're going to just go directly to the game plan. Or if they try and get crazy and they just leave it there, if they just leave their bishop and play some other random move, take it. Just don't even think about it, just take it. Because by doing that, it doubles their pawns and we are happy. When these pawns will become on the same file and they'll become weaker that way, meaning we can attack them later in the game. We'll be gaining an advantage. But hopefully, this is what you'll see. So after this, take with the queen. Do not take with this pawn. That is not good. Take it with the queen because it develops a piece and it gains more control of the center and it keeps our pawn structure healthier. And now they may bring their bishop out, and if they bring this will also be the most common line. If they bring their bishop out, take it. And if they take like this with their pawn, we're happy. We don't have a problem with that. If they do that, they're good to go. Now, if they play this, we're also happy and we're not worried about it. We just continue with the game plan. And the game plan now is c3. They'll probably play bishop here, bishop. Sorry, that's not a bishop. That's a knight. They'll probably put their knight here or here. Or they might castle, but castling, personally, for me, is not very good for black. I think they should develop a piece. So I'm going to assume that black develops a piece. Let's say they put their knight here. They're not probably going to copy us anymore at this point. Hopefully they want to just change it up. Or if they're just copying us, we're probably going to win the game because we get to move first. Now, at this point in the game, we bring our knight out, and black, most likely, well, we're not even going to address it as most likely. If black will castles this way, to the right side or to the left side, we're going to do the same thing. So if black, 9 times out of 10, will castle king side. When black castles king side, we will castle queen side. Why are we doing this? Because the reason is we have our defensive setup. We have a beautiful pawn structure in the center. Our queen is there just helping laser in on the position, and then our knights can also come in. This knight right here is defending these squares, which this knight would like to come to, but it can't because our knight is there to attack it. So with this is the position we have, and at this point, I would say the opening technically probably ended right about here. The opening is probably over, or even more farther down at this point in the game. After the bishops get traded, bishop trade, the opening's basically over. But part of an opening is knowing the moves that come after the technical term or the definition of opening. You still need to know the next moves. And these are the next moves that I'm teaching you after, as you can see right here, move 8. These are still part of our preparation. We should still know these moves. So with that, we get to this point. We castled queenside. And now this is where the opening is over. I'm just going to give you what I would do here if I was as white. My opponent would probably bring their rooks to the center, which is just a very common theme. Put their rook in the center and try and push this pawn. Or they might try and push these pawns to attack your king and attack you over here somewhere and checkmate you. The thing is, when you play the London, what you get into is fairly simple. After this point, we put both of our rooks right here. This is what I would do as white. I'd put my rook right here. Rook on g1, rook on, I believe that is h1. Yep, rook h1. And whatever they think they're going to come do to us, we're going to push our pawns. And, they're going to play some random moves. I'm not going to play this as a professional or as a very serious of what is actually going to happen in the game, but this is going to be something that's very similar. Your opponent's going to make some moves. They're going to push their pawns. We're going to push our pawns. yeah, they're gonna keep coming. They might bring their rook over here and try and start an attack this way. We're gonna push our pawns and just push them down the board, and then hopefully use all these pieces to checkmate our opponent at some point. Because look at the king. The king's right here. The black king is in this box. It is on this side of the board. All of our pieces, but the king and this knight, are targeting. This queen's targeting that way. This knight's targeting that way. Both of these pawns that originally were doing nothing down here are now part of the attack. They are attacking the king. They are coming to help checkmate the king or even promote to a new queen by reaching the end. That would be awesome if we could get another queen, right? And then these rooks are backing the pawns up. So if the pawns die, well, the rooks are going to hopefully capture whatever kills the pawns. And that's just kind of the London system. The goal, so let's just review that real quick. So hopefully you know in game what to do. So I would encourage you to pause the video uh, at the end maybe, and write down these moves. This is the notation so you can take it home and play it out on a board. So you can help remember the moves and play this opening. So I'll just go through them. I'll just leave the video here for a second. You can pause it. Write down your moves to move 10. And then I'm going to just scroll this down so you can see the rest of the moves. So pause it here, write down the moves to, oopsies, it doesn't want to let me do that. Write down the moves to move 10. And once you do that, I will then show you the rest of the moves. So pause it. All right, now that you finished writing down the first 10, you can write down these next couple moves right here. And that is a London Opening. You now have a professional opening. This opening was played in the World Championships by the player who won the World Championship match, actually, Ding Liren. He beat his opponent, Jan Nepomniachtchi, with the London system. So it is a beginner opening, and in the chess world, sometimes people think it's just a opening that beginners use to get out of playing something complicated. And that's exactly what it is. You're just trying to play an opening that you know you can play and you know these moves, and that's just what you go for every time you're white. So with that, that's the London. Again, remember, the London system, it's a system. What's a system? I already said this, but if something is a London or if something is a system, if we play d4, let's say our opponents instead, they go crazy. They're like, I'm going to play this high level opening. This is called the Indian game. And basically they go here. You know, things are going to get a little interesting. And all this is completely fine for black. These are common moves. I don't expect any of you to know this setup as black. This is a higher level setup for black. But if you did play a good opponent, online maybe, or in person, you could still play your little London setup like this. And you'd be fine. You have nothing to worry about. Your position would be golden, and you would just continue with the plan, which would be getting all your pieces out, all your pieces developed, castling to the opposite side of your opponent, which generally would mean castling queenside. So honestly, just make it a rule of thumb. When you play the London, always just castle queenside. Forget what I said about castling to the opposite side of your opponent. Personally, I think queenside is it's a little bit more aggressive, but at the same time, you can play very defensively with your king on this side. So just to show you the moves for fun, this is kind of what would happen probably in this game. Black would castle. You'd bring your queen here. They might try and this is called fianchettoing, which is when you push one of your flank pawns, and then you put your bishop where that pawn was. And then see here, we just castle queenside because that's what you do in the London. And they would go here, bring the rooks, and whatever they do, they try and start pushing pawns. We're coming first because we have both our rooks, our bishop, our queen, our knight, and our other bishop. Every single piece but this knight right here. This knight right here. He's the only guy who would not be participating in this attack, and it'd be fairly easy to get him into the attack. But he also serves a purpose. He defends this knight, so this knight doesn't have to worry about being protected by a pawn because it's protected by another knight. So again, I don't expect you guys to have every single position black could bring at you memorized. So I would rather you just play the London and, play the same thing every time because no matter what black throws at you, you're ready and you can just play this opening. Now, just on the topic of openings, D4 is not the only opening. You can open with E4 or you can open with C4. Both of these are good moves, but the reason I would like you guys to play the London with D4 is because if we play E4, our opponent can play this move, whoops. They can play this pawn move, they can play this knight move, they can play this pawn move, they can play this pawn move, they can play this knight move, they can play this pawn move, moving it 2, they can play this pawn move, also moving it 2, or they can play this C pawn and they can move that. And all these openings all have different names, and there's different things you need to memorize in them. And as a beginner, it's a lot to play against a skilled opponent who's playing from this manner. But if we play D4, the only moves that are actually considered equal, or at least give black a chance of playing for a game where they can hopefully get a draw or a win, is the move D5 or their knight out. These are the only moves that they're going to go for. They're going to either put their pawn out or they're going to put their knight out. Because if they try and do something else, the London or just any other variation of a D4 opening is going to crush them. And the London is a D4 pawn setup, so it will most likely win you games against some trickier openings. So with that, we now have figured out what the London is, and now hopefully you guys can play this in your games. So yep, just remember the notation that you wrote down. Skip back in the video if you need to. But yeah, go ahead and play games against each other using this opening. And your friends hopefully play online. Focus on getting really good at playing the London and getting used to everything your opponents will play against you. That way you can be better prepared and know which moves you like to make personally. Because a part of it is you may like playing the London differently than I just told you. You might like castling your king to this side of the board instead of to the queen side. You might think king side is better. It's not one way or the other. I just believe that castling queen side allows you to have the best winning chances. So that's the London system.